This video is sponsored by my app, link in the description. Late last year, a man from Pennsylvania was caught using a Lyft ride to get rid of what was left of college student Jenna Burley after he ended her life. You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. Services like Uber and Lyft allow people to quickly call for a ride to get where they need to go, and they allow everyday people like you and me to make some extra cash. It's strangers riding with strangers. What could possibly go wrong? Well, these allegedly true scary stories from Lyft will show you exactly what could happen. If you want to be in a future video, I'm looking for creepy online gaming stories. If you've got one, send it to me at darknessprevails.org/submit, or use my new app, Spooked. It's got all my videos and thousands of scary stories all in one place, and you can send your story on the go. If you guys could download it for free and leave a review, I would be so happy. Thank you. Link is in the description. Now then, let's take a ride with a stranger. Number 1. I almost quit driving for Lyft. Submitted by Derek. For the past year, I've been working as a Lyft driver. I would make some extra cash after getting off work from my full-time job during the day. Lyft was helping me pay for an online college course, and it doesn't really feel like a job at all. I love driving. I live in the beautiful state of Montana. Day or night, driving here is relaxing. At least, for me it was. Well, I had an experience late last year that almost made me quit driving altogether. I got a request one night to pick up some kids at a nearby university. It was a couple of guys who had been partying a little too hard and needed help getting back to their apartment a couple of miles down the road. Except for one of them passing out in the back of my car and the other one carrying on a conversation with the sleeping guy, the drive was uneventful. I dropped them off at their apartment, and that was that. But almost instantly, I got another request for a ride. One last ride for some extra cash, I thought. Plus, apparently, this one would take me down a scenic road. I made my way there, driving up a mountain-esque road that took you around a wide bend before going back downhill into a couple of miles of forest. It was quiet there. The sounds of the city didn't reach that far. I'd even camped out there before. It was nothing but peace and quiet. I had taken the bend slowly that night, making sure to keep an eye out for upcoming headlights. This part could be dangerous, but only if you didn't pay attention, or if you were going 20 over the speed limit. I rounded the bend, and my vehicle was soon swallowed up by dense wilderness. Here, I rolled down my window, taking in fresh air and the passing sounds of crickets and nighttime birds. When I saw it, by then it was too late. There was a huge moose in the middle of the road. I swerved, barely clipping the thing, before my car flipped and wedged itself into one of the nearby trees. I don't know how long I was out when I woke up, but I do know I'd never hurt so bad in my life. I was nauseous. My collarbone felt like gelatin and stung like 1,000 wasps were going at it, and I felt dizzy and faint. The seatbelt kept me strapped in upside down. Below me, the cab had bent under its own weight. Glass shards surrounded me in the floor, and there was a small yet growing pool of red below my head. I raised my hand up, something that was suddenly a colossal task, and I felt my side pocket for my phone. It wasn't there. I looked below me, or above me, I guess, into the shards of glass. There it was. My phone must have fallen out. I began to reach for it when I suddenly heard an odd sound from the distorted driver window, which had also completely shattered. It was a huffing sound. I slowly looked over to see something horrifying. A bear. It was examining me. It would lean its head in, then yank it away like a cautious yet curious animal. Eventually, after I stayed quiet and still for a while, trying not to pass out again, the bear lost its sense of caution and inserted its entire head inside the cab. Then it began to drink. It began lapping up the red pool forming under me like a thirsty dog, not at all bothered by the pile of glass it was rubbing its tongue against. My eyes widened. I'd never seen a bear in real life. Now I was face to face with one as it enjoyed my fluid. I stayed still, knowing it was all I could do. I had to wait, then I'd call an ambulance when I was safe again. When it had drank all that I had dripped, the bear began to look at me, then to my left arm, which dangled in front of it, bruised and injured, and it began to nibble. It stung badly. It didn't completely bite yet. I could feel its teeth pinching and nipping at the skin, testing and tasting it, while enjoying whatever flavors and things were on the surface of my skin. I was crying by then. Tears ran up my face. I felt hopeless, and I hadn't yet come to terms with what was about to be a very gruesome and very painful end. Suddenly, the bear pulled its head out of the window, as if alerted to something nearby. Then it bounded off into the woods. I quickly grabbed my phone and called for help. They were on their way, but I couldn't help but wonder when the bear would come back. I was fading out of consciousness again, but knowing that that creature could come back, I fought it for as long as I could. But I passed out before they found me. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. I stayed in that hospital for 4 or 5 days. Family would come in and out, asking me what happened. I told them only of the moose for a while, because just thinking of the rest of it made me want to vomit. I still felt the fear as if it were fresh in my mind. I still work for Lyft, even though I don't want to. It's the only thing keeping me in school. But that night, I almost experienced my very last drive. Number 2. Almost taken by a Lyft driver. Submitted by Mallory W. I live out in the boonies, and I don't drive. So to get around that, I would often stay at my then-girlfriend's apartment on work nights and take a Lyft to and from my job. My girlfriend only lived about 7 minutes away from where I worked, so it worked out pretty nicely. One day after a particularly stressful shift, I went through the motions of taking off my apron, getting my stuff out of my locker for the day, then calling a ride from Lyft. The driver's picture creeped me out though, but I brushed it off. I'd gotten creepy-looking drivers before, and most of them turned out to be really nice people. You know what they say, don't judge a book by its cover. However, this was one time when I should have trusted my instincts and tried for a different Lyft, or just walked home. The driver pulled up into the parking lot, and I climbed into the back seat. My first clue that something was up was that he didn't check in with Lyft to indicate that he'd picked me up. I didn't really mind though, I didn't think it was any of my business, and I just wanted to get back to my girlfriend's place and relax. The driver had a very thick Russian accent and spoke very little English. We said our awkward hellos, and he started driving in the opposite direction of my destination. That was another red flag, but I thought maybe there was a car accident or something on my usual route that he was just trying to avoid. Well, he could have told me, at least. There was a song I really liked on the radio. I was quietly singing along to it when the driver suddenly looked back at me. He smiled really wide and said, "Very pretty girl, very pretty voice." It startled me, so I stammered out, "Oh, thanks. while trying my best to smile politely. I just wanted to get home. About 10 minutes into the ride, I was beginning to panic. He was still driving in the opposite direction of where I needed to go. So I asked, "Where are you taking me?" trying to sound casual. He muttered out something that I couldn't understand about the GPS. About 5 minutes later, he was still driving the wrong way. I found my keys and placed them between my fingers. Then I hid them from sight behind my hoodie. If I had to fight him off for any reason, I was going to be ready for it, and I was going to take him by surprise, if possible. A few more minutes passed, and I realized that he'd just driven past the building where my mom works. Coincidentally, it was around that same time when my mom called. "Oh, hi, Mom," I said, trying to put emphasis on the fact that people would notice that I was gone if he was indeed taking me. She asked me where I was because her car was parked in the lot of my girlfriend's apartment, so she could pick me up and take me home. "Oh, I'll be there soon, Mom, I promise." The conversation took a minute or two. The only place we could possibly be going in this direction would be the airport, and I couldn't stop wondering, why would he take me there? I asked him again, "Where are we going?" Again, he said something I couldn't understand, except for the word GPS. "Well, mine does work, so we're going to use that." "Okay," he said. "Turn left," I demanded, but he replied, "I don't understand." I showed him my phone screen, and as soon as I did, he tried to grab my phone from me. I ripped it away from him. He wasn't about to take away my one connection to the outside world. "Turn left now, or let me out." Thankfully, he finally listened to me and made a left turn. I guided him step by step back to my girlfriend's apartment complex. What should have taken 7 minutes lasted for about 45 minutes or more. When we arrived at the complex, I began to get out of the car when the creep handed me a $20 bill. I think he was trying to keep me quiet about the situation. I didn't stay quiet though. I told my girlfriend, mother, and best friend. Then I spent the money on pizza and filed a police report. To this day, I wonder what would have really happened had I not taken control of the situation. Please, be careful out there. This is one of those things you don't think will happen to you until it finally does. Number 3. Creepy Lift. Submitted by Ashkaba. This happened pretty recently. My friends and I went down to Pennsylvania for the weekend for a nice getaway. We did drive down there, but since our plan was to go out all weekend, we didn't bother driving from place to place that weekend due to safety. Instead, we turned to Lyft, since Uber was giving me a hard time down there, and I usually prefer Lyft anyway. Saturday night comes around, and my friend Lily and I went to this club. We were only there for 2 hours, max. Later that night, we decided we wanted to head home to Jersey. We had come with friends, so we had planned to Lyft back home. It was only $60, which we were going to split anyway between the two of us. We requested a Lyft, and already it was off to a bad start. Our driver wasn't able to find us right away. Made us walk to him instead, which was annoying, but we disregarded it. Things happen sometimes, you know? The drive was less than an hour, so we figured it was not going to be too bad. The driver was a man in his mid-20s, it looked like, and we were having a conversation with him. Then he began to ask us many questions as to why we drove that far down, and why at this time of night. We didn't think it was a big deal, so we answered. He stopped for gas at one point, and we did not mind. In fact, my friend and I went in quickly to get some snacks at the mart, which the driver was okay with as well. After we got everything we wanted and filled up on gas, we got back in the car and hit the road again. Back on the road, the driver began asking us more personal questions, which I found a bit off-putting. But Lily and I were both a bit buzzed at that point from earlier, so we went with the flow. To an extent, of course. He then proceeded with the creepy questions. Now, this time it got inappropriate, and we were actually getting uncomfortable at this point. Lily and I had both been making lesbian jokes back and forth the entire ride, but that's just how we get along, and our driver must have gotten the wrong impression from us. Either that or he didn't know his own boundaries. Anyway, a little after that, the driver suddenly pulled over after taking a detour down a country road. And this part was really creepy. It was all farms and such, and it was dark out. No one was around for miles. I think by then the two of us were very aware of what could happen if we stuck around. So I texted her my plan, which was I was going to order another Lyft or Uber, and we were going to get out of the car. While I did that, she had an emergency number typed in onto her phone pad and was ready to dial at any moment. The driver started to try to get us to come to the passenger seat up front with him, and he started to move his hands between his legs. Ugh. It was so disturbing. We quickly got our stuff and got out of the car, and we hopped into the next Lyft, which didn't take too long to show up. We were so shocked by this that we made a report with Lyft, and their investigation is still ongoing. I'm no longer a Lyft customer because of this. It's just Uber for me from here on out. Number 4. Horrifying Lyft Encounter. Submitted by Lulu. I like to party quite frequently, so I would use Lyft to get me where I needed to go. On this particular night, I was at a party with my friends, and I was with one of my good friends, Luke. I was wasted, so I decided I'd better go home. But when I found Luke, who was supposed to be the driver that night, he couldn't even drive at all, let alone stay awake. Come on, Luke, I thought. So I decided to use Lyft because I didn't know anyone else at that party, and I didn't want to ask because that would be awkward. After about 15 to 20 minutes, a dark bluish pickup truck pulled up. This truck looked so old and rusted, but I didn't put too much mind into it because, you know, maybe he was trying to make some cash to get a new vehicle. I walked up to the truck and I hopped inside. I said a quick, "Hello," but the man didn't say anything back. Keep in mind, I'm about 5'6" and 145 pounds, so I was always nervous about using Lyft, Uber, etc. I noticed the man was about 6 feet tall, and he looked to be about 50 to 60 years old. He had long, black, greasy hair that went down below his neck. He smelled horrible and had very dirty clothes. I told him my address, and without a word he started driving. And as I'm sure many of these stories start, he went the wrong way. Then I noticed we were going deeper and deeper into the country. We were going down dirt roads that I've never seen before. It was then that I was starting to get worried. He was going faster and faster as well. At one point, I ended up glancing in the back of the truck in the bed, and there I saw things like tape and ropes and gasoline, and this didn't help the worry go away at all. I was starting to panic. I'd gotten myself into a potentially horror movie style situation. Completely terrified, I did what I thought I had to do, and to me it was a better idea than jumping out of the door while the vehicle was moving. I hit him square in the face as hard as I possibly could. He grabbed at his face where I'd hit him, and luckily he slammed on the brakes. With his other free hand, he was grabbing for me, but by then I was already out of the door and running back down the road. I could hear him screaming behind me, cursing me, and saying things like, "You little, I'm gonna find you and feed you to my dogs." And then the psycho man started to just laugh, and I couldn't help but shiver. When I glanced behind me, the last thing I saw was his truck door still opened, and a silhouette of a man stepping into the woods nearby. I stopped running just long enough to grab a fallen branch to protect myself with. Let me tell you, I've never sobered up so fast. And luckily for me, as if by some miracle of God or a heavenly power, there was a car coming down the road. I waved them down, and they took me back into town. When we had turned and went back down the road, I looked in the back window, and I saw the man standing in the road. He was motionless, staring at me despite the distance, and I'd never seen anyone with a face so angry. To this day, I still remember the exact details, and I am horrified every time I recall the situation. I'm warning you, always be cautious when you call for a Lyft or an Uber. Number 5. Clingy Lyft Driver. Submitted by Melly. This strange encounter happened to me a year ago. I was around 18 years old when I decided to try out Lyft for the first time. I was enjoying a night out with my best friends in downtown Chicago. I realized it was getting late, so I had to get to the train station before I missed the last train. I didn't have a car either, so usually Ubers and trains were my way of getting around. But that night, after having a bad experience with Uber, I ended up trying Lyft for the first time. I was waiting outside a restaurant while I hugged my friends goodbye for the night. And 3 minutes later after that, my Lyft pulled up. As I got in the back seat, I said hello with a smile on my face. The guy turns around and greets me with a hello as well. He seems to be 22 or 23 years old or so. He's very tall and extremely skinny. Overall, he seemed like a pretty normal dude. As he begins to pull away and starts driving toward the train station, he tries to make some friendly conversation, talking to me about the city, the things he likes to do around town, and asks me what my hobbies are. I normally answer like I would with any friend. We seem to get along pretty well. That was until he asked me if I would like him to drop me off at my house with no charge. This offer was both exceptionally weird and exceptionally kind. I was kind of weirded out by it, but I thought maybe he was just trying to be nice, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt. So I politely say no to his offer, but he asks me more and more, trying to push it on me. "Are you sure? I already passed the train station though." As he said that second part, I started to get goosebumps, and my eyes got bigger as I noticed instead of taking the highway to my house, he turns out of the city and gets on a very dark and sketchy neighborhood road, a darker part of Chicago. Then I freeze as I see him grinning at me from the rearview mirror. I didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. My phone didn't have a battery. That's what I get for taking selfies with my friends. And he was driving at least 40 miles per hour. Besides, I'm a wuss when it comes to doing crazy things. And by crazy, I mean throwing myself out of a moving car. I ask him, "Oh, what are you doing? Is this some kind of prank?" I couldn't believe what was happening to me. Every time I said something, he would just tell me to relax, while he kept that cringy smile on his face. This went on for 12 minutes. I noticed he had turned off his GPS. I got too caught up in the action that I realized too late. He tries to turn to a dead-end street in a sketchy suburb, but thankfully, he was about to stop at a red light. As soon as he stopped the car, I opened the door and tried to get out. He screams at me, "Where are you going?" As I close the door, I see him half climbing out of the front seat into the back, trying to get to my door and to me. I slammed the door, and I ran to the nearest gas station to call my boyfriend to pick me up. He was working before, but should have been off now, so there was no way I could have called him for a ride. Anyway, now that I was able to, he picked me up, and I told him the story of what just happened. We get home safely, and I finally go to bed after a long and pretty scary day. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. Around 1 in the morning, I wake up to get some water. It had only been a few hours since the incident. I live in a small hometown in a quiet neighborhood. Everyone there minds their own business, and at night my town looks like a ghost town. Anyway, as I make my way downstairs, I could see a dark red car parked by my driveway. I glanced at it, looked away, then looked back. It was the same type of car that the crazy Lyft driver had been using. I live with my mom, but she drives a white car and she was out with her boyfriend at the time, so it wasn't her. I looked closer out the window to try to make sense of it, and I could see him sitting inside the car, staring at my house. I think to myself, what does he want? I quietly run upstairs and look through my jean pockets for my ID, and I realize I dropped it when I got into his car. Maybe that's how he found my address. I called my mother and told her what's going on. She got back home in about 8 minutes, since she wasn't too far away. As she pulled up, the other car pulled away, and the crazy dude left right away. For the next 3 nights or so, I would see that same vehicle outside my house, just sitting there. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm afraid he's going to find someone else, someone who won't have a chance to escape and leave the car. And number 6, my crazy Lyft driver, submitted by The Steal is Real. I'm 23 and live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've never been big on social media or apps, so I had never heard of Lyft until I saw it on the news one day. I always drive wherever I go, because I get carsick while other people are driving. But enough of that, let's get on to the story. I was visiting my brother Pierce in California. He moved over there because he loves acting, and he plays small roles in TV shows or movies. California was right up his alley. I had been there for 3 days when he got a call and had to leave for a job. He was going to be an extra on one of my favorite shows. Anyway, that just gave me more time to get to know my brother's husband, Tom. Me and Tom really hit it off. We shared a bowl of popcorn and watched the newest episode of Supernatural, before moving on to some Shane Dawson and Super Mario Logan videos on YouTube. We went to bed around 3 in the morning. It was a great night. The next day, Pierce still wasn't home, so we called him, and he said he'd be home tomorrow. Tom and I decided that we would go shopping and have a day out. We left the house around 12, and we had a long day of shopping. Around 5 that evening, we had a lot of bags to carry, so Tom decided that we should get a Lyft to take us back home. The app said there was a driver right around the corner, so we wouldn't have to wait very long. When the driver pulled up, he seemed really nice. He was driving a Honda Civic that was in really good condition, and he was wearing a bright smile on his face. "Hi, my name's Kyle. I'll be your driver. You can put your bags in the trunk if you like." We said thank you as he opened the trunk. We walked around the car to the trunk, but we were hit by the most horrific smell. It was a horrible stench that hit me in the face, and I noticed a dark spot in the side of the trunk. Tom looked at the guy and said, "Hey, what is that dark spot?" The smile on the man's face disappeared, and he looked at us very grimly. Then he replied, "Just don't ask about that." Tom and I looked at each other, and I could see that he was thinking the same thing I was. We just sat the bags in the trunk away from the dark spot and got in the back of the car. We got inside the car, he locked the doors, and we began driving. Hey, you don't know where we need to go yet." The guy just looked in the mirror and kept going, before eventually saying, "It's alright, I know where we're going." I just looked at him and said, "Where the heck are you taking us? We've been driving for 20 minutes now." That's when he slammed on the brakes, then turned around quickly in his seat to look at me. I could see that his eyes were bloodshot, and he said, "How stupid do you have to be to climb into a stranger's car, especially after seeing the blood in the trunk? God, people like you are so lazy. Can't just walk a few blocks to get somewhere." He seems indignant. He punches the gas, and we tear off down the road. Every second, we were getting further and further away from my brother's place, and we were scared for our lives. I wanted to call the police on my phone, but I knew the driver would see, and there was no guessing what he'd do. But that's when we noticed that the door on Tom's side wasn't locked. Apparently, the driver's side door locks didn't lock that specific door. Maybe it was broken, but it was definitely our only opportunity. I whispered in Tom's ear what we needed to do to get out of this. In one quick and far from fluid motion, Tom and I jumped out of the car and were rolling down the asphalt, and let me tell you, it hurt bad. Once the rolling stopped, I clumsily and painfully found my footing. Then Tom and I ran inside the nearest gas station. Looking outside, the man didn't come back for us. He was probably just trying to make a getaway. So we called the police, filed our report, and an ambulance took us to the hospital. Tom's arm was broken, and I had some burns and bruises all over my body. We were able to go home the same day. That night, when my brother got home, Tom and I latched onto him, and that night we slept in the same room. A shocking experience like that makes you feel a little unsafe for a while. The creepy thing is, though, after this happened, at my brother's place, there have been people coming up to the door and knocking, and they always come by in the wee hours of the night, the time of day when we're too afraid to open the door. I hope they catch that guy. Lord knows who else he hurt in the past. Whether you drive for Lyft or you ride with Lyft, you should always be very cautious of who you invite in your car or who you ride with. Strangers should never be trusted right away, even if they're providing a service that is seemingly harmless. Carry protection with you of some kind, because if you can't protect yourself, you might just end up in another country or a warehouse as a slave to someone's disgusting desires. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to send me your online gaming stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. Also, please go download my new app, Spooked, on the Google Play Store. It's free and gives you a catalog of all my videos and every story I've ever published on my website at your fingertips. That's hundreds of hours of videos and thousands of scary stories. Plus, you can make an account, customize your profile, and chat with other people who love scary things as much as you do. Check that link in the description and you'll be able to download it. Also, please review it if you can as well. I'm trying to get 1,000 reviews, and we're almost at 100 last time I checked. Thanks so much, guys. I wouldn't be here without all of you. Anyway, as always, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video, about 5 real ghost sightings. Dalton Whitney says, "I believe in ghosts. Love your videos." Thank you, Dalton. Even if some folks don't believe in ghosts, ghosts believe in them. They're there with you through thick and thin. Blue Jaguar says, "My doorknob is like my gran. It tastes of Smirnoff Ice." That's not a thing you should say, ever. What? Blue, go to the corner and think about what you just said. Adriana Sanchez says, "I swear, Darkness, my life has gotten a lot better ever since I found your channel. Now that you've joined us, you have to become a missionary and spread the word. Convert other people to Darknessism." Sweetheart Sonia says, "We can never have nice ghosts. Like, why can't we have ghosts that help you out with taxes and pass you the remote, instead of ones that knock your crap around? I know, right? I want me a sexy ghost. It'll give a whole new meaning to knocking my crap around. And Romeo Denar says, finally top 20. I always look for ways to get here. These stories are the only way I get to sleep. You do a really good job. Now I'd say something witty, but bacon pancakes are the only things in my head. Well, I'll be off to IHOP now, guys. Thanks for reminding me about pancakes, Romeo. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for listening to my stories. Here are the credits to everyone who supports me on Patreon. If you want to be in the credits as well, think about donating just $1 a month at patreon.com/darknessprevails. Now, stay safe out there and stay creepy.